Consolidation in corporate agriculture. Who benefits? That's the question we're asking and getting answers to in this episode of The Business of Agriculture. Hey, Damian Mason here with a question before we hop into this episode of The Business of Agriculture. If you farm for a living, you employ a lot of amazing technology, from your inputs that you put into the soil to the tractor that you sit in, your combine, and the amazing data that it harvests. But has your soil analytics kept up technologically with everything else in your farming operation? I would venture to say that no, it is not. Sure, you check for your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium, your micronutrients as well. But what about disease pressure? Do you know what diseases and what pests you're going to face next year? No, you don't. But you can now figure that out with Pattern Ag's predictive analytics. Think about it. They can tell you now with testing what the likelihood of facing nasty diseases, things like cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome, what the likelihood of you having this in your field. Then you know how to prepare, how to treat, and where to invest your money. It's using technology to make you bigger yields and therefore make you bigger money. Go to www.pattern.ag to learn more. They are pioneering the way in predictive agronomy. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of The Business of Agriculture. I got a great show for you today. I'm doing a bit of a series in case you are wondering here. In another recording, I talked to the Landis CEO about ag retail consolidation, about farm level consolidation, and it's a big enough topic about the industry getting smaller, and I'm not talking about the dollars, I'm not even talking about the acres, I'm talking about the players in the industry, and I want to cover it again. So I've got Jim Davis, he's with Corteva. We're talking about the consolidation that has happened for, frankly, a very, very long time in this industry, and I'm talking mostly about the corporate level, the manufacturer level in particular, and also we'll probably get into a little bit about the retail. But Jim's with a company called Corteva. You know about Corteva. They themselves are the result of a consolidation between Dow and DuPont. They also just recently have acquired Stoller. Stoller has been around for a very long, long time, actually, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that does. And we're also going to talk about what the hits to innovation. Do we get more? Do we get less? We know that consolidation brings usually a great deal of investment. A lot of times, larger organizations buy innovation from smaller upstart companies. Happens all the time. Google still buys companies after all, because now they're the great big, elephant in the room in the way of tech. So there's this thing that happens all over. That's what we're digging into. So Mr. Davis, it's been going on for a long, long time. People get worked up about it. Right before I hit record, you said people get worked up about it, and you said, I'll just save it for the recording. So just let's go there. People get worked up about it.
Yeah, I mean, good question, Damian, and I think a great topic. I'm now in my 33rd year of working career, post-college, native of Illinois. I think the first integration I went through, a merger, was in 1995, 96. And I've kind of been a product of that generation. Since the time I started, you look down the list of manufacturers, there's a lot fewer today standing around at a trade show than there were a number of years ago. But the industry still grows. And the technologies are farther advanced today than what it was when I began. So, we all wonder, when we go through them, we wonder from a personal standpoint, how's this going to affect me? That's human nature. Right. When you're with one of these companies, and I can tell you, Corteva, you realize the accelerated innovation. And then the business almost gets a little cleaner, because the legacy companies have been big conglomerate organizations. And, Corteva now is a pure play ag company. So you have a board of directors made up of people that understand agriculture, and 100% of your investments going back tied into agriculture. You're not fighting against resources for different business units. So, I mean,
all right, let's just stick right with there, Jim. So because I know we pitched this to you, and I said, I know it sounds inflammatory because you are with a huge corporation that is the result of consolidation. Like I said, in particular, you and I really met because of the Stoller tie-in, the Stoller buy, if you will, that you guys, your company has acquired, in the last 12 months, right?
Yep. So it closed in March. Yep, 1 year old.
Okay, so March of 23. We're recording this, depending on when you're listening to it. We're recording this here in spring of 24. So the point I want to make is, while it sounds a little inflammatory, who benefits? Like you'd be like, oh, he's against it. It's been going on for so damn long. The first question that the first answer we can go ahead and give is, if consolidation at the corporate level of agriculture, and I don't care whether you're for or against it. I mean, this is a show where we have business people on here. Many of the people who are listening to the Business of Agriculture show are people like you. They're farm kids like me and you. They've worked in industry, and they know what happens. So the first thing I think we want to hit on is, if it stifled innovation, we would still be driving farm all M's, because obviously it's been going on since you and I were born and long before that, right? The number of seed companies, the number of feed companies, the number of machinery manufacturers, et cetera, is less today than it would have been, 100 years ago. I'd call the advent of ag's rapid advancement began in the 1930s, certainly post-World War II. But then we hit this bubble in the last 50 years. There's been about consolidation. So I think the first thing we should probably say is, if consolidation hurt innovation, I don't see it. because
I would agree.
Because obviously, look at where we are. We're grabbing 177 bushel, corn averages across the United States average. The soybean average is double what it was, and you and I went away to college. I mean, come on.
Yeah, when you look at it, and I think you got to keep the farmer at the center of this, because if you lose track of what's going to be good for the grower, then the mergers don't work. Yep. If you make, and I think that's part of, I can get wound up and excited about this. Bottom line, if you don't make great products that solve a problem for the grower or help their net farm income, you're out of business. And I think the people that you've seen survive and go forward, companies got, there were technologies that were outdated within the organizations. Mm-hmm. But they had one or two pieces that needed to go forward. And so to keep it to scale didn't make sense anymore. Mm-hmm. Think back to, you and I seeing yellow herbicide sprayed everywhere in soybean fields, Treflan days.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the old Elanco here in Indiana. Well, those compounds were going to decline, but there were other things in the pipeline. Mm-hmm. And so when go back to Dow and Elanco coming together, then you had enough to keep the critical mass in the company to fund the engine for the next things that came up. So as technology moves out, the companies that stay, either they develop or they go out of business, mm-hmm. or they're removed. And you've got to keep things that are there for the grower, or we're all going to suffer. So I think I have a tough time hearing the message that this is bad. Mm-hmm. It's highly competitive. And if it wasn't highly competitive, I don't think you'd see the push for the innovation. You have consolidation, but boy, we still compete with our, the companies across town, right? So that's what drives you.
Okay, so let's think about this real quick. You just said, and I don't think it's just, something they told you at your last HR meeting that you're supposed to keep saying to farmer first. The point is, we know that in this industry, Jim, net farm income drives what happens at the corporate level in many ways. Yep. And then when the farm income's really up, let's face it, you can pass on some price increases. We know all these things happen, but you and I both are dependent on ag revenue, period, because that's what our industry is about, production agriculture, right? I mean, you and I both work in ag, and it's right. Keep backing it down or trickling down or whatever the hell you want to go back 3 steps. It comes down to that. So you talk about putting the farmer first. And Matt Karstens, who I recorded the other episode, I'm going to release these two, in unison, about consolidation at the retail level. And he said the same thing about putting the farmer first, because that's at the retail level. So here's the thing that I do actually want to revisit. You said Corteva now is a standalone agricultural entity, the combination of Dow DuPont's ag side, not the division.
Correct.
Not the division that makes Teflon, not the division that makes, Corningware plates for my grandma's kitchen. You are now, and there is maybe a lot more defendability, a lot more plausibility, maybe a lot less bullshit factor if you say we're more farmer focused now than we've ever been. And I really think that the ag person listening to this has to give a little bit of credence to that and say, yeah, they're not now the same company that makes plates and skillets and paint that goes on Jeff Gordon's NASCAR. It's a DuPont reference from way back. But anyway, that's what we're talking about. And I think there's some credibility to that statement about the ag and the farmer focus, because you are not a Teflon company. You're not a plate company.
Good Indiana drop on Jeff Gordon too. I got to give you credit for that one. for two guys living in Indiana. Yeah, I mean, it's not that difficult to understand. People step back for a minute. When you're part of a large conglomerate, you're going to go through annual resource allocations, and we all know ag is cyclical. And when the ag economy's down, the R&D group's looking at something that could be a great consumer product over in the paint division, or in the your grandma's new Tupperware. All right, that's what you're going to compete against. All we have is agriculture.
Yeah,
you have a board that thinks agriculture. You've got a CEO that grew up and is one of the best in the industry in agriculture. So we don't have to re-educate. Here's why you need to invest in agriculture, and that is, and I'm going to be a hometown guy and say this. That is one of the core strengths of Corteva. Yeah. And you've got to be an innovation company.
Mm-hmm. Now, the argument would be, again, I do a speech called The Asians of Agriculture, and I use a great deal of words that end in Asian: consolidation, innovation. I talked in my other episode that's recorded about the limitations of consolidation. We'll get to that in a little bit. But one thing that you just said, though, when you're all in an ag, you don't have diversification. And so part of the line of thinking when these companies were assembled, I mean, my God, Dow, the forefather to Corteva, 1840s or 1860s, right, out of Midland, Michigan. Part of the whole idea there was, well, we make chemicals that we sell to the military. We make, technology that goes in plastic, that goes into the auto industry. There's no diversification when you're all in on ag, and there's going to be somebody right now scratching their head saying, Damian, I'm really glad you pointed that out, because when ag's going into this, as you said, we're a cyclical industry, and we tend to be counter-cyclical. Ag tends to be on an opposite cycle as Main Street USA. When the chips are down a little bit on ag revenue, like we're supposed to be 40% off from 2022. This year, 2024, ag revenue is supposed to be down 40% from our high water mark of 2022. Then without the diversification, one could say, well, they're not going to make any investment in new innovations and technology. The R&D department's going to get unfunded because they don't have revenue coming in from, like you said, Teflon or whatever the other thing would have been. So talk a little bit about lack of diversification and its limitations.
Yeah, I would fair points, and I love the candor and how we, in your episodes, how you go about this. I challenge you on it. Because if you're not innovating, you're dying. And I mean, that is, I don't think anybody can look at what technologies in your life and career, in my life and career, that we've seen come forward, and we've seen some pretty bad days. Yeah. Okay. I mean, let's face it. Willie Nelson was singing on stages and doing Farm Aid. In the last few years, that hasn't been the case. We'd love to hear him, but
you and I both are about the same age, so we can give without anybody thinking that we don't know what we're talking about a pretty good synopsis of the 1980s. Yeah. So your point is, even if you're not diversified and you don't have revenue coming out of the consumer goods division, now you're all in an ag, you think there still is a discipline to continue to innovate, because if you don't, you're yesterday's news.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you have to do. And it's, you've got some hard numbers, whether I can't speak to all the competitors in the industry, but 6 to 8% of the revenue being put back into the R&D business. You start to look at that, million something a day when you break it down. That's our core, and we know that, and that's the challenge. And so it is more than just Corteva. I mean, there's and that's where we start to look at these things. What's going on? What can we do to solve the problems with the grower? And there has been genetic gains, and there's been trait gains and chemistry gains. And, we did find ourselves, moving more over into the biological business. You look around the globe, Europe has a different set of issues that we have here. But at the same time, and you brought up Stoller, what's going on there that world record yields are being obtained on the same hybrids that I'm planting in Indiana, but they're doing this in Virginia, and it's 623 bushel corn. What are they doing? And that's where we got into, you start to look at that innovation and you scratch your head and you're like, there's something here. And I think to dial it in specific on that category, growers are going, okay, what's going on? I mean, what is this? And I'm interested. I've seen the data, I've seen the research, and it's like, yeah, 70% of the growers are going, I'm interested in that, but I need to know more and I need somebody to explain it to me.
Mm-hmm. So, and I want to talk about the Stoller thing specifically because it was a step into biologicals, and we're going to get all into where mergers, acquisitions, and consolidations come, and because that's where we're going to see a boatload of them. Before I do that, speaking of innovative companies, I want to talk about Redox Bionutrients. Redox Bionutrients is a sponsor here of this show, The Business of Agriculture. I've been to their headquarters in Burley, Idaho. I met the founder and CEO, Darren Moon. He started out in specialty crop. 30 years ago, he invented this company because he thought maybe that they were using a little too much in the way of synthetics, and he had some ideas that maybe we could create a better product for the use in specialty crops. Then he moved over into turf, and now increasingly the products are being applied to broad acre. Redox Bionutrients is basically 30-year-old company that is helping farmers make a shift from traditional fertilizers to carbon-based technology. You're talking about not biological stuff that's all just funded by these new tech companies. You're talking about something that's been around for 3 decades, so it must work. Redox Bionutrients provide superior nutrition, abiotic stress defense, root growth, soil health, and efficient nutrient uptake. You can find out more at redoxgrows.com. Thank you very much for being a sponsor of the Business of Agriculture, Redox. Okay, the hot new space. I just read a spot there from Redox. Let's face it. There's a slide that you and I both have seen, and it shows like 400 of the names in biologicals, and that's 1/3 of them. There's 1,200 biological companies, upstarts, that are almost all, many of them were tech. You're talking like the tech sector that just had cash coming out their out their right. nose. They got the Brinks truck comes in every day, and they all said, and I don't know who sold them on this, because it's really, I want to meet this person, brilliant salesperson. Whoever sold the tech Silicon Valley types that agriculture was a great place to put your money, I want to meet that person, because generally we have very low margins and we generally overproduce. So whoever told them, you better go in, and you know why I think they did it? Someone's tied in the word climate change. So if you can go into an investor room in Silicon Valley and tell them, hey, you've got $3 billion of cash laying around, you should fix climate change through agriculture, through biologicals. Yippee, I'm in. And now there's a boatload of these companies out here, Jim, and almost none of them make any money. And almost all of them are brand new to this with a product that they're like, you know what? This thing's going to work. And you and I can both call BS on some of it, much of it. But then there's some of it that's been around for a long time. The Redox guys they don't even want to be known as a biological. They say, no, we're not really a biological. Don't call us that. And then like Stoller, you guys at Corteva bought Stoller because it wasn't a 2-year-old company with $10 billion their money.
Right.
Tell me about, first off, comment on the whole biological thing, and then bring it back to Stoller's joining Corteva.
Yeah, it's such a big space, and it's cloudy and it's confusing. For the last 7 months, I've been working on the integration, bringing it to life in North America. And I think at the core, what I realized and what Corteva really got with Stoller was, it's going to sound cheesy, customer centricity. The grower, as they would say in Brazil, the client is the center of it. You know, they would say they don't have products, they have solutions. You've got to understand what's going on in the field and what is the plant, what's going on in the plant, and how can we overcome that and fix it. So it's a solution. Fantastic group. And I think there's a chunk in North America who really get this, and they're all in. And there's a lot of people, growers on the sideline, kind of doing the looking over, going, something's over there. I got to figure this out. Mm-hmm. What am I missing? So I think it's taken, Stoller was one of the most proven companies in that space. Mm-hmm. And you could take their science and their data, and I think we talked in Commodity Classic, multi-hemispheric data. I mean, anywhere around the world that they've existed, they've tested. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the opportunities we've got, is to bring their data package with our science and put it all together.
Do you think, Jim, the founder of Stoller, I can't remember his first name.
Jerry Stoller.
Jerry. I was going to say Harry. So Jerry Stoller gets a lot of deserving accolades as the father of biologicals. I mean, they were out there. This company, again, this didn't begin 4 years ago with $1 billion from a tech company and a greenhouse. They've got some history here.
Yes.
Were you were you part of the team that said, if we're going to get into biologicals, let's buy Stoller? Or is that like 3 pay grades above you who said, here's the 3 companies we should look at acquiring?
No.
It's a fair question, isn't it?
No, actually,
is that a fair question?
Fair question? It is. I was probably like the 98% of the industry that just kind of went and said, I don't know what that is over there. I'm doing here's my lane.
Yeah, we're gonna stick with that.
Yeah, the reason that I came over to this business, one, it was when I was talked to about it, I thought it was a pretty interesting challenge. I have a number of friends that I've worked with and have gone to college with, industry folks who have ended up in this category. I did my personal vetting out. Tell me about this area. Mm-hmm. And, I figured out where it was going. But for me personally, it was understanding of the retail network, how to work with them, and the grower, that we could find a common path to get these solutions out there. And that's, there's a lot of different routes to market with these products. And we're trying to do it to a way that we can get to the grower and help them understand. Damian, I go back to this. When you look at, I'm going to be a data junkie. When you look at all the market research in this category, there's like 8% that say, I'm all in. I get it. I use it. I'm all in. And then there's like another 70% that when you look at the data, it's like, I know there's something there. I don't know how to use it. I need somebody to teach me. I got to sort through this.
On the Stoller thing, and 35-year-old company, something like that?
I think you're close.
Okay.
Yes.
So
I couldn't tell you for sure.
So you got, Corteva, you're one of the big 4, right? Okay. Bayer,
Yep.
Bayer, BASF, Syngenta, you guys. You could have bought a bunch of different companies, and maybe you still will. And maybe you still will. You said you're 6 months, 7, 8 months into the integration. Tell me then about another Asian word, about the integration of the consolidation. And
sure.
And let's face it, Corteva, man, you're the company that, I'm a former DuPont intern. So you're talking about Accent, you're talking about Classic, you're talking about Lorax and Lexone. I'm going back to way back. You gotta be my age or older to even remember those chemicals. You're talking about you were Dow. you were what the hell are the Dow products? Post no, it's BASF.
That was BASF. Right. Lorsban was a big one.
Lorsban, there you go. That's the insecticide, isn't it? So anyway, you're the Lorax, Lexone, Lorsban companies, and now you're in biologicals.
Right.
Did you walk into some ag retailers? They said, "What the hell are you people doing? This ain't. Hey, get back in your lane." Tell me about that integration.
Yeah, it was, I think we're all friends enough, the first, when the announcement came out, you got a lot of, hey, is everything okay? Kind of jokes. It's such a big space, and we've got to clean it up. And that's, I think after a few months in the role and talking to our executive leadership team and others, I'm like, here's the number one thing I've learned. Somebody needs to be the grown-up in the room. Mm-hmm. If we're going to make a claim, we need data. We got to have the facts behind it. We've got to understand mode of action. Too much noise here. Yep. The growers are confused. There's a lot of good solutions. They don't know where to start. Mm-hmm. And so I think that became my early finding was we got to clean this up and simplify things, because there's a great message for protecting yield, mm-hmm. but people can't dig it out of the clutter right now.
What? Okay, so yeah, the joking aside, that, but there's also a tremendous amount of, now I would think, the acceptance. There's, trust me, I know farmers and we know ag people, and I've got this much experience in ag retail, and just enough to know that there's skepticism.
Sure.
But now when a company of your size says we've entered the biological space, I think there's a whole bunch of people say, oh, this is real. And that's where I think that and I actually believe that. I believe, if you're, by the way, if you're listening to this podcast, good for you. You can find it on every podcast format. You can also watch it. You can see how good looking Jim is. He's a fit guy. You can watch it on Acres TV, or you can go on my YouTube channel. I wish you would. It's just go to YouTube and hit Damian Mason channel and subscribe to it. It's free. But anyway, you would see that behind me, I've got soil on top of money with plants growing out of it. It's a cool little backdrop. I'm all about the soil thing. I wanted to be an agronomist. I think the future is more biologicals. I think it is going to be less harsh chemistry. It's just that there's skepticism right now, and I believe the skepticism exists because there's a quantity of unproven products. Is that maybe the right way to say it?
It goes back really to basic plant science physiology, a lot of it. And the first thing you got to do is you've got to, and I'm learning this, I've even had to help people in Corteva. The first split is actually very easy to explain. Mm-hmm. Biologicals is a big arch that covers a lot. I told people, break it down into two categories: biocontrol, and then there's the plant performance, or biostimulants often referred to. Biocontrol is spray it, kill it.
Okay.
Disease control, insect control, and there has been.
Let's go ahead and then say that's what you and I would call traditional, conventional.
How do I work this in?
That's what you and I. When I was a DuPont intern, when I was 21 years old, that's the crap you walked into an ag retailer. That's what the farmer went in there to buy. It's what you went in there to sell. It's what you were walking around out in those fields trying to get the customer to utilize. It was killing. It's killing stuff. It's either killing or preventing, right?
Right. And so that's, that's where you got to draw that original split, is between, the biostimulants and plant performance products and biocontrol. And biocontrol has such a spot globally. And that's where, to our credit of Chuck Magro, our CEO, it's the classic, and he's Canadian, so Gretzky reference, skate to where the puck is going. Yeah. If there's the pressure in Europe and around the globe to reduce synthetic products, but you still need to produce food, you better figure something out.
I want to make sure your CEO is going to listen to this, so I'm going to go ahead and make a crack about Canada right now, because they like that. They like it when Americans bash on them, don't they? All right.
I hope you're hiring.
Yeah. So I want to then talk. Speaking of Canada, I want to talk about something you brought up a little bit ago about the Europe, and I want to get into that. So now we've gone Canada. I want to do a bit global. And where this consolidation, and I'm uptight all together.
So you mean outside of Indiana?
Outside of where you and I both are. If you can imagine, if there is such a place, if anything even happens to it. All right. So real quickly, if you want to make more money off of your acres and you're a farmer, you should, especially in a year like 2024, where we're talking about farm income going down. We're supposed to be at 25% deduct from 2023 numbers. So you know what? If your business is going to make less money, what if you can figure out a way to diversify your income per acre? And you can do that through a sustainability program. Truterra can help. Truterra, division of Land O'Lakes, is in the business of sustainability programs. We're talking about carbon. We're talking about all that stuff. And maybe you don't like it because you say, I don't know, man, I don't understand all that. Go to TruterraAg.com. I'll tell you what, here's how I look at it. What if you can make a few bucks per acre for just change up some practices, reduce tillage, strip till, cover crops, and all of a sudden it puts you some money in the bank, also helps your asset, improves your asset, your long-term asset, your soil, that's selling for 12, 15, back where this guest, Jim Davis, is from, is like $20,000 an acre over there, 9 feet of topsoil over there in Illinois. If they could get rid of Chicago, they'd really have something with that state. Anyway, go to TruterraAg.com to check out and learn more about how you can make more money on your acres in a sustainability program. You talked about what's going on in Europe, and your CEO is Canadian, all this. Is this consolidation, given that the big four in particular, like BASF, Bayer, you guys, large players in either genetics or chemistry or both, it seems to me there's going to be more tie-ups, more buying of these biological companies in the next couple of years because maybe the ag space gets a little softer, maybe the companies become a little bit more vulnerable or affordable. What do you see when you look globally in this space of consolidation, particularly as it relates to the biologicals?
You used a reference earlier. I think there's going to be consolidation, but there's a lot of interesting technologies out there that are startups, and they can't scale. And trust me, my friend, we're talking to all of them, and they're all talking to us. And I'm sure they are, our competitors. And there's some good hits, within the global library.
Which is unfortunate because it always, you talk to corporate and it's always scale, get bigger, bigger. And that's fine. I mean, that's how business works, et cetera. Now, the one thing when we talk about scale and we talk about a declining ag economy, a lot of times consolidation happens just to improve economies of scale to then go right back into commodity mindset of how can we make everything cheaper and that's one thing I've never liked about ag. We run right into our bunker commodity mindset of how can we hunker in the bunker and not spend any money. And that flies in the face of what these biological companies are, Jim, because they've more absolutely been out there on the forefront of a new frontier.
Right. Well, you've got scale gives you I know you like playing on words. One, it gives you availability, and I think it gives you affordability. You can have the greatest discovery, but if you're going to want to use it, I mean, it's a cost of goods, and companies pass that along because you're a for-profit company. And so if you're going to get solutions that are affordable for the producers, you have to have some scale. Mm-hmm. And so that's it. And then you have to have the ability to distribute it globally and to educate globally. I mean, Damian, the biggest thing about the biological space, people mock what they don't understand.
Yep.
And kind of the old phrase, it's this foreign land to folks. And so they look at it, and we know all the terms they've used. And the true agronomist, and my friend and your friend Mario Carrillo, that's with the Stoller Group, and he's a PhD, and he goes, I thought I understood agronomy.
Yeah.
Until I got into this side of the business, and I realized I really don't.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't worry about scale as a bad thing.
No.
I really think it's more about getting to the grower where they can afford it. We can afford to produce it. They can afford to use it. And there's all the way through the value chain. And there's a consumer demand for this. I mean, they want to know we're doing the right thing.
The scale, if it means that you can produce something that then makes it available and also, as you said, affordable and also available everywhere. Yeah, you can get this in Huntington County, Indiana. Well, that doesn't do me a lot of good if I'm in, 3 states over. So I've got all that. I just have seen, and I'm a little, shall I say, disappointed that usually our mindset is how can we go about becoming more commodity production, and that generally commodity mindset doesn't usually tie with innovative mindset. Is it kind of where I'm going with that? Yeah.
Right. I don't know that the tie-in on this is more of a commodity mindset. It really is fully understanding what they're doing. The biological products, and it's neat. We talk about the consumer. One for us is Corteva. The consumer is the farmer, but then there's the true end use consumer, and we could spend a whole nother episode on the demands there of what people want to know. How not just where their food's coming from, how it's produced, and the whole traceability. That's a whole nother. It's a whole nother show.
All right, it is. And we won't get into traceability and all that, but we will get into this because I said we're going to go international. You are an American company. The other 3 of the 4 bigs are Syngenta.
Correct.
Syngenta was bought by Chinese, more than a decade ago, I think. And then BASF, which absorbed Monsanto. We used to be the 6 big, now it's 4 big. BASF, 8 years ago, bought Monsanto.
Bayer acquired Monsanto in the late teens.
Okay, so 6 years ago, let's call it.
Yeah.
So, and then of course there's BASF is over there as well, in Europe. That is.
Yep.
When you said Europe's got a different set of circumstances, you're an American company. You took the 2 big American companies and merged, and now you're buying other stuff like Stoller acquisition, et cetera.
Yep.
We, from a regulatory standpoint, thank God, we're not where Europe is. But is regulation, and I'm talking about environmental, maybe going to force more of a movement to big chem like we talk about biocontrol. The history, the conventional is products that kill stuff. It kills fungus, it kills insects, or it kills weeds. To biostimulant type products, because there's going to be the heat of regulation or impending environmental laws that restrict us. And I've sort of seen that coming, which is why I'm asking you your thoughts. And certainly you don't know what the board of directors at Corteva is doing per se, but it seems like that's where there's going to be a more of a, shall we say, a bleed into, an evolution into, or a purchase and treading into the waters of biologicals because of the threat of future impending regulation. Am I reading this correctly?
Yeah, I think we can't escape that. And I can get on a little soapbox about we've got to do the right thing in agriculture. We get caught at times in issues, and you almost need to, the phrase of when things are good, look out the window. When they're not, look in the mirror. We need to do a real good job looking in the mirror and making sure that we're not putting ourselves there. When I say that, if there's technology that makes a plant, I'm going to be very basic, stronger, more resilient, which means a pathogen is easier to control to protect yield. Well, then we should look at that, because then if you can reduce the rate of a synthetic and still have the quality of production, that's where all this it kind of starts to tie in together. We talked a little bit at Commodity Classic about, I think you'll hear us more talk about it, summer decline, which is really this decline period of a plant. Really, you look in Indiana from about June 15th on, anything could, any kind of weather you could have.
Generally weather induced. And by the way, it was my favorite pickup. And by the way, if you're listening to this, I met Mr. Davis because of my job with Extreme Ag. And if you're listening to the Business of Agriculture, there's a very good chance you also know that I work for Extreme Ag, have now for almost 3 years, recording the Cutting the Curve podcast and also doing videos at events like Commodity Classic. So I encourage you, if you have not checked out my work at Extreme Ag, go check it out. It's Extreme Ag without an E on the front of it. Clever like that. Extremeag.farm is the website. So anyway, that's what Mr. Davis here is talking about. I loved the term summer decline because you don't have to be an agronomist or even a full-time farmer. If you're even remotely involved with how food production works, how crop production works, you said it, and I'm like, how is it that I'm 54 years old and I've been around agriculture my whole life, and I've never heard the term summer decline? So we're going to be covering that in some Extreme Ag stuff about addressing and remedying summer decline. So I love it.
Yeah, it's just, it's a whole complex of things going on in simple terms in a field. And there's a way to address it, pre-stress conditioning before it goes into that period, and help a plant, survive this summer better. And I think that's where some of this, to your original question on consolidation, that took some good people sitting around a room, and it was like the light bulb went ding. We keep talking about 4 or 5 individual issues. The reality is they're all happening in this window. In this period during the summer, there's a decline period, and boom, summer decline was born in agriculture.
Yep. You talked about, okay, we're going back to the international thing, and I know that you just said we probably need to always, try and get better, which that's logical, it's true, it's accurate, etc. Europe is arguably a naysayer or a more cynical person like me would look at and say, it looks like some of these countries from an are using environmentalism to basically just dismantle the agricultural industry within their country under the guise of environmentalism, which is foolish considering that some of those European countries are more environmentally dialed in than Brazil ever could be. But what we're talking about, do you think that this is really going to be a thing where we talk about biocontrol, where some of the stuff is just taken away from us completely? I think it is. And that's where the biologicals, I think, are going to have that's where the biostimulants and the biologicals come into play versus biocontrol.
Yeah, and by no means am I in our regulatory group. I still believe in the U.S. market. The American farmer believes if it's registered and the EPA says that it's good, we're good. Yeah. We kind of trust the regulatory system. I think you've gotten into a lot of, I know, in Europe, agriculture has become very, very political. Mm-hmm. And I think here we still hold the American farmer way up here. Yep. Cowboys, John Wayne, American farmers, noble. There's the mindset that people respect. I agree with that. And there's things in Europe that are going on. That's been part of the political revolt over there with the protests, from the growers in Europe over the last 6 months.
Oh, 2 years.
You're not allowing us to compete because you're putting unrealistic regulations on us, and we can't produce food.
Well, not even unreal. Yeah, unattainable regulations. So, all right,
without science.
And I don't want to get into too much. I don't want to make you go out here on a limb of talking about politics, but that I think it does tie into where the consolidation goes. Let's go back to the original question about consolidation in corporate agriculture, who benefits, because obviously we're talking about the producers. But before you do that, I want you to do me a favor before we hit record. The companies that you've worked for and how they were semblances of other companies, just to illustrate, because you and I both know a little bit about ag chem, you more than me. Rhone Poulenc, Sandoz, American Cyanamid.
No, I didn't have American Cyanamid. I
had Ciba Geigy. You started naming them, and I'm like, God, this is like a walk down memory lane for all of this. And the point is, they've all gone through consolidation.
Yeah.
And here's the other one. After you get done doing that, then we got to talk about who benefits. Go ahead, just give me some fun on all the consolidations you've seen in your 32-year career.
Yeah. I could rattle them all off. When I came out of school, and that was the fun thing when you were an ag graduate in the early 90s. The job fairs, there were all these companies in agriculture. Yeah. Okay. Well, now who consolidation's tough on? The ag grad. Because they used to get courted by 15 different companies at a career day, and now there are 4 or 5. Still a great number of reps. But when I started, and if I went off the top of my head real quick, you had Sandoz, Ciba, ICI, Bayer, American Cyanamid, Monsanto, Valent. I'm missing a number of them.
Well, the two that became your company, both Dow and DuPont.
Oops, forgot those two.
Okay,
Dow and DuPont.
There's another company that's got Indianapolis roots that was in the ag chem back then. Lilly Elanco was in there.
Well, it was Dow Elanco when I started.
Not originally, was it?
Yeah. When I came out of school, they had just merged. Okay.
It is. And we can go on because I'm sure we can name a few more. I mean, Shell, for God's sakes, the oil company was in the.
But we would hear things like these companies. When you come into school, and they're like, "Oh my God, that must have been so long ago." Now we're in that group, right? Because the precursors to that were Velsicol, Union Carbide, Amchem. So it's happened for as long as this industry really has been around.
The modern, since yes. I'd say really agriculture as we know it really has its roots in about the 1920s, 30s, right? I mean,
yes.
We just started going like truly just jumping amazing amount on the utilization of technology, mechanization, and hybridization being 2 of them, and then
right.
You talk about just this went up, just boom, all of a sudden you're talking about the huge bump in yields, and then the consolidation of the farmers because there was less. People could do as much work. So it's all that. All right. Who benefits? You just said the ag graduate doesn't because there's fewer jobs.
And I don't have the data on that. There's fewer companies. But there's still a number of jobs. I think.
I don't know. All of a sudden, let's use your industry. If Dow had a sales rep covering 6 counties in Nebraska and DuPont had a sales rep covering 6 counties in Nebraska, they sure as hell don't need two people to cover the same 6 counties. So from a consolidation standpoint, there is less ag employment. I don't think that there's almost any arguing that.
Yeah, you're seeing companies. Yeah, I think the data would say that new grads.
Okay, so and then the same thing, and that's fine. It's what the world looks like. And the good thing is there's probably somewhere else that they can go. But
there's probably more, on the science side of it. I'm thinking commercial because I think
the farmer benefit.
Yeah, you'd have it, my friend. You would have a very difficult time drawing up a business case to show me the grower doesn't benefit. Okay. And they're my lifeline, and family and friends back home in Illinois. And we've sat around the tables, we've had these talks. I just think I can't look at a data set that would make me go, "You guys lost in this deal."
Yeah.
When you look at productivity, sure, does a bag of seed cost more today than it did 25 years ago? Yeah. Look how much more you're producing. What are the traits that are included in it? What are you saving in other applications?
Yeah, I'd say the quality of products. And then, of course, the person that's on here that's a farmer is going to say, yeah, but we pay through the nose. It's all expensive. I've also been hearing that since the first time I went to the co-op when I was a little kid, that everything was too expensive. So there's nothing new about that argument. Has it got some validity? I don't know. You know what? Generally, the products are pricey, but they do 4 times as much as the product would have done 40 years ago. So there's a lot that goes into the ag inputs. And when you look at an input sheet, no doubt chemistry and okay. So farmer benefit, you say farmer benefits because the plethora of products is still big enough, and it's not as though there's only one provider to where you can hold them over a barrel, and probably antitrust laws will keep that from happening.
Yep.
I've got a question. Does the ag retailer benefit? I actually, my hunch is ag retailer got squeezed because of corporate consolidation.
Boy, I don't. That's a great question.
I ask a great question.
Mr.
Davis, would you just go ahead and say it right now?
You do. That is a great question, because you've had parallel paths of consolidation. When you look at it, when I came out of school, when you were interning, the number of different locations you might call on and the number of different names has gotten down. So their scale.
There was probably a dozen places in Huntington County that you could go and buy a jug of whatever the chemistry was. That also, if you were a sales rep, you should have called on them. And there's not a dozen places in Huntington County that you can go and get ag chemicals from today. So they've consolidated as well and pared down and maybe have bigger, fewer.
I would say because of their professionalism, they've elevated that. I'm going to say category of ag retail. You look at, and it's going to be a soundboard, but Corteva, launching the Brevant brand, whole nother set of genetics available through ag retail for the grower to get to. So I think there's a real good case. You could say they've benefited. Retail has benefited from this as well, because they still have access to the products. Probably less of a distraction at the local cooperative. They don't have 10 people coming through their door trying to get their time. There's 4 or there's 5. So I think. I don't know if I can answer that, but I wouldn't buy into. I'd have a good debate with my retail friends if they've benefited or not on that.
Sure. I'll tell you what, you invite me to your house in Zionsville, and I'll and then put about a 12-pack of Coors Banquets on ice, and by God, you bring me in and give me a few beers, and I'll have no problem stirring the pot. All right. Last thought.
Yes.
Consolidation in corporate agriculture. We've talked about it. We covered it. We've gone plenty long here, but also I think it's great information. Like I said, I'm doing 2 episodes on this topic because we see it, and we'll likely see some more of it, because when the ag economy has a little downturn, there's always a race to consolidate. So your thoughts?
It's pretty well consolidated right now. I mean, there's not a whole lot more that can happen in
other than those biological companies getting bought.
The biologicals, and it may not be as sexy to throw private equity money into those right now to keep them going. But the good technology is being explored. I mean, there are no secrets. If somebody's onto something real good, they're letting people know it. So you're going to see more consolidation there. And honestly,
and also on the biological,
we need to. And
I'll be honest with you on the bio. I mean, Redox is the real deal. They're not even really a biological. Stoller, obviously, the real deal. They were grandfathered in biologicals. Many of these companies that we talked about that have VC money behind them, I've likened it, since you're an Indiana guy and I am as well. You're an Indiana person now, and I'm a huge Indianapolis 500 fan. The Indianapolis 500 was begun in 1909. 1911, and it was a challenge to the automobile manufacturers to produce a car that could actually last 500 miles, and the one that could do it in the fastest time got this huge cash prize. They did it because Indiana had more than 100 manufacturers of automobiles in 1911.
Yeah.
How many manufacturers of automobiles are there in Indiana? There's several that are here. None of them are really actually headquartered here, right? So
right.
The same thing is going to happen we need an Indy 500 of the biologicals. Challenge the ones that can actually go 500 miles in the fastest amount of time, and they get the cash, and some of the others are going to probably just go by the wayside like stuff.
Do I have your permission to use that analogy?
I use it on stage, so probably not. But yes, you can. You can say I heard it, as long as you say.
I'll give you. I will give you. You can use summer decline if I can equate the biological business to the Indy 500 when it started.
Yep, I think you can. In fact, I'd be honored if you did so. Just give credit to Damian Mason. All right, we're gonna wrap it up with that. His name is Jim Davis. He is with a company called Corteva. You might have heard of them. And if they want to find out, somebody wants to contact you for any reason, they find you on LinkedIn. Go on the Corteva site. What do you want to do?
Yeah. I'm not big enough to be on the Corteva site, but you can find me on. You can find me on LinkedIn.
All right. Till next time, I really appreciate you being here. Do go check out my YouTube. I really want to grow the subscriber base there, so hit subscribe on that. It doesn't cost anything. I put out good stuff, and I'd like you to see that. And also share this with somebody who can benefit from it. We're starting our 8th year of the business of agriculture. An episode drops every Monday, and we've got great companies like Pattern Ag. That's right, Pattern Ag. Predictive soil analytics, and then predictive agronomy, if you will. And then we've got Redox Bionutrients, and we've got TruTerra that have made this all possible. He's Jim Davis. I'm Damian Mason, and this is the Business of Agriculture.
Thank you, my friend.
Hey, thanks for being here. This episode of the Business of Agriculture was brought to you by Pattern Ag. You've heard me talk about Pattern Ag because I think it's a pretty cool concept. New technology that allows you to predict the problems you're going to have and therefore treat them before those problems cost you money. What kind of problems am I talking about? Pests and disease. Things like cordon rootworm, sudden death syndrome, cyst nematode, and a whole bunch of other bad things that happen out there in the field that can cost you money. Guess what? Pattern Ag will let you find out ahead of time if the disease or the pest pressure is there, and therefore you're treating it before it costs you any money. What a great concept. Go to pattern.ag, that's www.pattern.ag, to learn more about their product, their technology, how it can make you money, save you yield, and also where you can find a rep that can come out there and do the work for you. Pattern.ag.